Even though Ordinals is, for other people, they're calling it dead or a fad, what people could reimagine is think of Ordinals as Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been called dead for 400 times. So regardless what happens for Ordinals, I think it's going to be around for a long time. They just need to look at it differently, change their lens.
I remember when I first even got into the space, they had already had this Wikipedia encyclopedia of Bitcoin obituaries from the amount of times that publications said Bitcoin is dead. And it was in the hundreds of times already back in 2017. So I can't imagine today it's probably in the thousands. Ordinals is going to survive. The Lindy effect of Bitcoin is just astronomical. It's not going anywhere. And there's going to be a thriving NFT and non-fungible asset utility and community, and maybe even tokens with BRC20s. It'll thrive. It just needs to go through its own growth period and maturation. Bitcoin whales are in the house today. I'm lucky enough today to be sitting here talking with Tosyo, the founder of Bitcoin Whales. And man, personally, I have to say, I've seen this gentleman go through quite some growth, where during the Bitcoin punks era, Tosyo and I had actually jumped on a call to kind of just talk about Ordinals. And this was before Bitcoin Whales was ever a thing, at least from my understanding. And so to see your tremendous growth since then, from a little account to, I believe, a little over 100,000 now, really commend you, bro. And I'm excited to learn more about Bitcoin Whales. As a disclaimer, I also am a Bitcoin Whales holder as well, because I'm excited to always buy into ecosystems of builders. So appreciate you, Tosyo, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jake, for having me here. Yeah, it's been a while since, we started during the punks era. And at that time, I remember there was literally zero marketplaces at that time. And everyone was just using Sparrow wallets. And we were still doing OTC trading during that time. Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while.
How are you, Jake, doing?
I've been good. We've gone through some crazy growth. I believe when we jumped on a call, that was, the Sparrow wallet days. I believe Emblem Vault had just been used for the first time with Bitcoin punks. And we were just really exploring like what ordinals even are, right? What is utility? What are PFPs? This is before Magic Eden jumped in the game and all that stuff. So we've been here for quite some time, and you've seen some tremendous growth. But to just, start it off straight, I know you said this is kind of your first podcast, as many other previous guests I've had from the Ordinal ecosystem, which is quite incredible in my opinion, because it shows there's, a lot of new and interested parties who want to participate and step up to become a leader. So, maybe the inexperience will be better because we're not blinded or, degraded by all of the Twitter influencers and the toxicity that surrounds us sometimes. So you kind of get a fresh start, and, maybe this is your fresh start as well. Tell us a little bit, because we're not too familiar outside of, your whale antics, your whammies on Twitter. Tell us a little bit about the history of Tosyo, how long you've been into crypto, and what brought you over into Ordinals.
Definitely. So I started back in 2021. So I was inspired by, I guess, by anyone else. Like, we all watch our favorite shows. Like for me, I was watching Mr. B. So I was watching this guy. Like this guy is doing something crazy, and it's like he's doing good. Like we're in that he's good in retaining his audience. And at that time, I was a streamer on YouTube, so it's not quite big, nothing like him. And I asked my friend, like, dude, how come this guy how can he do a crazy funding like this for his videos? And he told me that, oh, it's because Mr. Beast was doing crypto at that time. And I think that inspired me to get started on crypto. Like it's something basic, not crazy. And I guess another factor would be working for the state. So I used to work in a state prison, so I kind of saw where the taxes are going, essentially. And this struck me that I think, I need to get started on Bitcoin and in crypto overall. So after getting immersed with DeFi, I ended up getting more involved with play-to-earn games such as Axie Infinity. And that's where I started, wherein I was exposed to NBA Top Shot and Bored Ape Yacht Club. And unfortunately, I faded them like anyone else, like nobody knew that these magical apes would somehow be worth something good in the future or fruitful. So from Ethereum, I branched out to Solana. It was a different community there, and it was quite welcoming, you know. And later on, after gaining experiences from Solana, wherein I was working as a community manager for different communities. I ended up finding out Ordinals, and this was from Udi. So Udi was quite convincing at that time when I watched his video on YouTube. And this enticed me to essentially get my feet wet into Ordinals, wherein there's a difference between having an Ordinal inscription and an NFT. Like there's a huge difference. So that's how we got started in Bitcoin Whales, because supposedly Bitcoin Whales was supposed to be in a different blockchain. And technically speaking, the name of Bitcoin Whales wasn't supposed to exist if it weren't for me finding out about ordinals.
Interesting. So it I would say that a lot of founders or recent creators in the ordinal space have came from Solana or Ethereum and kind of brought over those experiences, tried to apply it. And this is, I think, where we're starting to see these different ecosystems emerge, from PFPs to generative art to, you know, DeFi with BRC20s to now even Bitmap with kind of metaverse properties. What would you say were your biggest lessons that you'd learned from dabbling over on Ethereum and Solana, and then bring it over to ordinals with Bitcoin Whales?
I would say, I think I think everyone witnessed or experienced rather getting scammed or rugged while they were investing to a specific NFT. I would say if you were to build your own collection, make sure you can commit to what you say to the public. You know, like as cliche as may sound, like, you know, it's better to under promise and over deliver. So that's why we decided to have Bitcoin Whales as a free mint instead of being a paid mint, because originally it was supposed to be a paid mint.
And why did you decide to move to the free mint? I know that's also been a trend within the ordinal space. A lot of BRC20s have done this, but not every ordinal collection though has. So what was that determining factor?
I think the determining factor at that time would be to make sure that we actually onboard more individuals in the Ordinals ecosystem. Because in comparison to Ethereum or Solana, they have a bigger community there. And as much as we want to make sure that the Ordinals ecosystem would flourish, and I do believe that that starts with the free men, because, you know, we have to factor in how psychology works. Like everyone wants it free. Like if we want to onboard normies in the space, people from Web 2, we want to entice them. We want to give them something for free. So that's the best way to essentially onboard new individuals within the space.
And I've pulled up here now a few posts from your Twitter account just discussing your journey through ordinals and Bitcoin Whales. You know, you mentioned here that you found a co-founder who is helping you manage the community. Now putting your founder, your creator hat on, how would you describe the back-end process of setting up Bitcoin Whales, determining the image, the art, community management, and up until mint? Take us through that process through Tosyo's eyes of constructing Bitcoin Whales.
Definitely. So originally we were supposed to have like weekly spaces to essentially educate individuals before we launch Bitcoin Whales. Unfortunately, you know, like not everyone would actually help out from the beginning, because, you know, there's big uncertainties right there. And we essentially started with a small team for Bitcoin Whales. And like I said, I met my co-founder Tiffany in Solana, and I know her work ethic. It's ultimately fruitful for the project itself. So I know that we would work out together in the long term. Like she's someone that I could count on for sure. So that's how we got started. And for the rest of the team, I was able to connect with them essentially in a private Discord group, wherein we essentially were able to build rapport to each other and discuss like what are our strengths and weaknesses. And this is where we got started. We started with a small team, like a team of 6 in the core team. Then we weren't expecting this type of hype for Bitcoin Whales. Like all of a sudden, like from 300 followers, we managed to end up having 10K followers in less than a week. So things like that, we weren't expecting that. So this is where we actually had to onboard more individuals to our team. So we had to vet them tediously to make sure that everything would work out. So from starting the marketing of Bitcoin Wells to Postmint, it was a bit challenging as everyone could see because it's something that the team weren't expecting, like this type of hype. So I would say that, like up until now, we are still adjusting.
Yeah, I mean it's been what, maybe about a month or so, maybe a month
I
and a
think it's
half.
been less than a month because we launched on June 30. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been about 3 weeks since then.
Yeah.
8,000 or 7,999 put together in this collection. Because right now the floor is about, what is that, 14,000 sats, I think, or 0.0014 Bitcoin. You have 4,500 owners, 8,000 supply, and you've gone through and mint this. It's, of course, along the lines of all ordinal collections, pixel art, but in terms of the whales, who is the artist for, or who was the artist for Bitcoin whales? And how many revisions did you have to go through until you felt like the art had been completed?
Oh, that's a good question. So the artist that we had, we met him in Solana actually. So his name is Chris Saturn. So he's also the artist for different reputable projects on Solana. So when it comes to the character design with these whales, we had quite a few revisions there. We started working on the art back in February and we finished this around second week of March. So it's been a while actually.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And the big question I have about this is where do you go from here? We're seeing, I'm just going to pull up Magic Eden. I'll go through a few of these collections, right? We see Lil Peepos, is a PFP, I guess say Bitcoin Punks, Bitcoin Frogs, and OMB. So there's really maybe, or you have Taproot Punks down here at the bottom, so there's maybe about 10 or so, maybe 15 top PFP collections, or at least that or have deployed successfully and are now kind of moving into these next directions. Like what are the plans for Bitcoin whales? Is this just something that's going to exist as art, or is there some planned utility, quote unquote, that the team has and is ready to launch at some point in the future?
Actually, yesterday we put out a teaser for our incubator. Even though that this was a free mint, we always aspire to give more value to our holders. So even though that we're launching a code and code utility, I don't think necessarily we should be called as a utility NFT. I would prefer being called as a PFP base or a brand for Bitcoin whales. That's what I want to avoid. So in the next few weeks, we plan to launch our incubator, Block Creator, wherein this would essentially focus on creators and future project owners. And later on, it would be available for Web2 enterprises as we further flourish the incubator itself. So another thing that I want to bring up actually is we had an AMA earlier and I actually released some new insights for Bitcoin Whales. One of them is actually releasing our own BRC20 token in the ladder wherein we aspire to have our tokens having a use case wherein you can mint future ordinal collections in this specific launchpad with the wet token, as well as using the wet token to purchase some whitelist spots through our incubator itself.
So okay, so the goal then, or the plans, is to create a launchpad or incubator. There are many teams who are going down this road. As a creator, or even putting your entrepreneurial hat on, you don't believe that a launchpad space is too crowded at the moment. There's you have Magic Eden, you have Ordinal's Wallet who's doing one, right? There's the Council token is doing one. I would say there's maybe about 10 that are out there. You have Luminex. How does Bitcoin whales set themselves up to have an advantage in this maybe ever becoming crowded space of launchpads?
So for the Launchpad, we're not making our own Launchpad. We're partnering with the Launchpad wherein it would be multi-chain, wherein they can pay with Solana or Ethereum or even with our wet token to essentially get the ordinal inscription.
Mm-hmm.
And they are utilizing Layer Zero for this Launchpad. They are exclusively partnering with Layer Zero. Actually, it was mentioned earlier during the call when I had a meeting with them. So those are the things that we have in the pipeline for Bitcoin Whales. As I also mentioned to the community earlier that we are also partnering with bitmaps with Chris as we aspire to have a different way of distributing these BRC20 tokens besides using the standard such as staking, because I think that there should be a different way on how to distribute tokens, perhaps in a fun way. So I just think that staking has been around since 2021. Maybe it's time to explore different avenues when it comes to distributing our tokens.
Interesting. So there's a few directions we could go with this. First one I want to talk about is this kind of, it sounds like you're inferring that Bitcoin Whales is going to be a multi-chain community, or you're just accepting payments from other chains. Tell us your thoughts as somebody who's came from Solana. It sounds like that had a very large impact on your perspective and experience within the space. Is Bitcoin Whales going to be a multi-chain community? Is that the plans?
I would say not necessarily. It's more of the platform gives an option wherein they can pay in different cryptocurrencies. It's more of a leveraging layer zero to for that platform in order to have different use cases to it. But overall, a Bitcoin Whales would essentially reside permanently on Bitcoin Ordinal.
Okay, and then moving on to another component of that discussion, the wet token, BRC20s, horrifically down bad at the time of this recording. We've seen a bunch of tokens go up hundreds of percents all the way back down. Seems like there's maybe 2 or 3 right now who have any sort of attention. One of them is Trek that, is doing the indexing for Bitmap, which we'll dive into next. How do you see yourself and the Bitcoin Whale team preventing the wet token from falling or just cratering like many of these others in a kind of an ambiguous state of BRC20 where it's really uncertain what's the proper direction? We're seeing a ton of experimentation. We've seen cross-chain experimentation, new standard experimentation. Some are even going over to layer 2s. What is going on in the mind of Tosyo that is encouraging a token and entering a market that currently may be considered no man's land?
That's a good question. So for us, I think, yeah, like you said, that everyone is experimenting with BRC20s. And even though that this is a no man's land at the moment, I think there is a way to it as long as you make sure that the tokenomics was well planned and you don't release these tokens for the public just right off the bat just because of the hype before. I think there would be a sweet spot wherein there's actually a use case for these tokens, even though ultimately BRC20s are experimental.
Do you see BRC20s as a currency or as an NFT, or is this still undetermined?
I would say I see BRC20s as an alternative currency. That's how I see it. Like, to me, it's something that could complement a collection wherein it gives its, like, let's say for Bitcoin Wells, like the wet token would be its own currency or ecosystem. It would revolve around Bitcoin Whales itself. That's how I see it being utilized by different collections. And of course, we can't compare this to Forge or Dust Protocol because, like BRC20s, they don't have smart contracts just like other tokens from different chains, Like I said, it's still experimental.
And we're seeing a handful of BRC20s pop up as these community tokens. And there's 2 different directions to it. You begin with the BRC20, which is similar to what OXBT did and MXRC had done. And they're both utilizing those as community tokens. And then, yourself started with, the NFT equivalent first with Bitcoin Whales. We're seeing, some of the community tokens are used as kind of in-game currencies for like Zbit with the Bitcoin machine, and then the OG token with forget the gaming company, or I think it's Ords Games. How do you plan to utilize it? Is it just something that you're going to denominate all purchases within the ecosystem, or is there some sort of game or maybe instrument that Bitcoin Whales is thinking about that'll integrate it neatly?
Oh yeah, so we're actually looking into having a metaverse for Bitcoin Whales, wherein there would be like once you get into the metaverse, this is where you get into different mini games, and that's how you actually acquire these tokens in the future. So there's no timeline for what is being discussed during our AMA this morning, earlier this morning, and during this podcast as we record this. But this is why I had these calls with Chris. As we all know, he is constantly building bitmaps, and I'm quite bullish on what he's building for this ecosystem.
So just for clarification, Chris is Blockamoto, or is this somebody else?
Solana Chris from Bitmaps.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Let's dive into bitmaps then. I mean, it's got a lot of attention. There was also a mention to, and I just use this as reference because I'm starting to see a lot of these different communities all start pointing to bitmaps. I saw MetaGood also mention that they had some sort of plan. I believe for Bitmap, they said a popular metaverse. At first sight for Bitcoin whales, how do you see the community finding opportunity in Bitmap in a place that barely even has an indexer written, but there's a lot of, I guess you could say there's a lot of discussion surrounding the philosophy of Bitmap, let alone any sort of technical implementation outside of really just being able to parcel out these pieces of land. What is your philosophy for it?
I think regardless of the uncertainties for different opinions that other people have for bitmaps, when I was discussing this with the community, they were quite open to exploring this avenue when it comes to bitmaps. So for me, what matters is as long as the majority or the majority of our community is favorable for exploring bitmaps, I think it's also a good step for us to experiment with them.
So do you see it? Are you leading in using the whales as an avatar, or are you leaning towards building some sort of, we'll just call it Bitcoin whale land on a bitmap plot within the metaverse, something similar to you see in like Decentraland or like Sandbox, where you're just building this completely, or this big universe? Which one are you leaning towards?
So what I discussed during our AMA this morning was we're leaning towards to having one bit map wherein it would look like better than Decentraland or Sandbox, wherein there's different activities that they could potentially do in that metaverse. And that's how they essentially earn those wet tokens in the future. So we're leaning towards that. So to make it more unique for them, we gave them an option to have their whales being integrated within the metaverse. So let's say your own whale, right? You want your own whale to be in the metaverse. So in the future, that would be possible. But for now, what we're planning to do is we're gonna start with around 4 generic whales that they get to start on. And once they get more immersed within that metaverse, maybe that's where they decide that they want their own avatar within that metaverse. So it will be something on demand, and they can potentially pay with the wet tokens if they're interested in availing their own avatar in that metaverse.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it makes logical sense because the majority of how the ordinal space has grown is simply just looking over to what's happening on Ethereum or Solana and saying, hey, let's try to replicate that to the best degree that we can on Bitcoin, in the absence of smart contracts, which is subtly just being replaced with indexers, which, is not a long-term solution, but it's the solution for now. When you look at that kind of state of, the arguments between centralized indexers, are these things decentralized, the attack vectors, from an infrastructure perspective of ordinals and having, a community of 4,500 owners, does any of that concern you as you build on Bitcoin and become one of these, top communities in the ordinal ecosystem?
Definitely, there are some concerns as like for me, like if we build with or partner with bitmaps, like let's say I'm just giving a scenario here. So let's say bitmap suddenly phases out or goes to zero essentially. So what's gonna happen for any collections who have their own metaverses in bitmaps? Like for me, it's always good to have a safety net in a way. So if things doesn't work out, let's say it's going to work out for X amount of days or months, during that process, as a founder, I think it's best to come up with different solutions or future plans ahead for the project itself. Because let's say we're good in distributing those tokens for a few months, then all of a sudden it doesn't work out, like there has to be a different way to mitigate the problem. So for us, we like to prepare different solutions in times of uncertainty for sure. Even before there are uncertainties, it's best to have safety practices like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to have multiple strategies, especially in crypto where everything is ever evolving. I've learned this on numerous amounts of occasions working at Emblem Vault, that something that may launch may have been well received from an intention standpoint, i.e. hundreds of thousands of views and engagement, but then the actual activity of it once launched, may be much below the expectations. And then on the other side, counterintuitively, you launch something that kind of you had been working on as a side project, and it ends up being, the major use case for your community, for your product. So it is best to attack things with multiple perspectives, but also be willing to experiment on multiple things, especially in ordinals where a high degree of, let's say a high degree of consensus is socially. It's not technically implemented generally until later. And you'd mentioned that you seem to be engaging with your community on a high degree of social consensus to kind of see what the next moves are, or the right move for Bitcoin whales. And just take me through that of how you've managed your community. It seems like they're still quite engaging in a time where ordinals may be, at the bottom, hopefully at the bottom of this market cycle.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, right.
I can relate to that.
Hopefully. But yeah, just tell me about how the community engagement aspect has been going for Bitcoin whales and for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So, in these past few weeks, what we've been doing for the community is we provide more education. We got quite a talented community managers wherein they would educate our fellow holders on a weekly basis. So, like if you go to our Discord server, like there's a channel there that's called Ordinal Education. So that's where people would tend to lean on to in regards to education. And I would say another thing that helps keeping the community engaged is having these weekly spaces. So we have a different team or a set of community managers wherein they're helping me out to co-host on spaces, especially for them. Like they're far more experienced than me when it comes to hosting spaces. And I think that's one of the things that helps us get the community engaged. And let's say, there's a dilemma in the server within the holders chat. Let's say someone's fudding, right? So this actually happened a few days ago. So he's fudding for, whatever reason. Maybe the floor price is down and people tend to look at that sometimes. So what I usually do when there's FUD within the community, I try to actively mitigate it. I was asking him if he wants to jump in a VC with me in the server or get in a call so I can provide more clarity to him. Because there are just some things that I can't answer at the moment. Like let's say if they're asking like how come there are still twins for Bitcoin whales? Like I can't spill all of the alpha or details. So usually what I tell them, like is something that would help them understand what the vision is, at the same time not revealing the alpha or what's planned ahead for Bitcoin Well. So since that specific holder didn't want to get in call with me, maybe he was shy or he's a keyboard warrior or whatever you want to call it. I pinged the whole community. Like I asked them, like, hey, let's do an impromptu community AMA here. Like, I wanna hear from my community. I tend to always listen to the community and I always get their feedback. It's my way of building rapport within the community. Like we want to give them the voice. We want to acknowledge every concern that they have. That's what we want to do for them. And that's how we manage to keep the community engaged, even though we're in the midst of uncertainty for ordinals and NFTs in general.
Yeah, it displays true leadership to be in the Discord, answering questions, or even hopping on a call. I know it's quite painful from personal experience being in there, and it's not always going to be the case when the bull market picks up. it's going to be your community managers answering and not as much you, because you're going to have to be out, on the front lines leading and trying to figure out what the vision is. But as we kind of expand a little bit more macroly to Ordinals itself and less on the community, the community's has done a good job at, fostering positivity and acceptance, and very encouraging and welcoming to newcomers. We've seen a lot of animosity or self-cannibalization of the community recently, attacking one another. How do you as a leader of your community prevent yourself from engaging in this type of stuff, or play the other end of it and try to foster community when you see the larger ecosystem attempting to engage in, kind of self-deprecating behavior against one another?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I like to think of this perspective when it comes to driving. So my dad once told me, like, like if you're driving on the road and there's two different types of drivers. It's either you're a good driver where you follow the laws, or you're the type of driver who recklessly drives and just don't follow the rules or even stay in your own lane. So for me, I like to be the good driver where, and the world itself, it's already somewhat chaotic, and of course I just want to contribute to the other side where, and we promote positivity, and we just need to be better. The world isn't perfect, but we need to be better. That's how I see things when it comes to this. So, if some of the community members are getting involved with someone with a behavior that's inappropriate, I would do my best to listen on both sides and just to mitigate things. That's what I would do for them.
Yeah, I think I've seen the majority of your responses to shedding light on some positivity. Ordinals are in this despair kind of, or you could say, disappointment kind of part of the cycle. A lot of things are down. People are eating each other, but there is a lot of innovation that's happening. There's actual progress on Bitmap, which quite surprised, but as a holder, happy to see. We're seeing different types of infrastructure pops up. We're seeing, swap tools that had just been created in the last few days at the time of this recording, more advancements on, some of the more DeFi stuff that's been building. What are some things that you would like to see from an infrastructure standpoint pop up over, we'll say, the next few months in the Ordinal ecosystem? Is there anything from Solana, where the majority of your experience was gained, that you would like to see implemented on Ordinals in some capacity?
I think I would like to, I'm actually personally waiting for this since February. I think I even asked you in DMs. So I'm waiting on parent-child inscription. So this would, like you said, we need to have different plans or backups for the project itself, So I've been waiting for parent-child inscriptions for a while. So this would lean towards to what I'm building originally when I first reached out to you, which is still confidential, by the way.
Yeah, I haven't shared it yet.
So that idea that I have in mind, it's still playing out. I'm actually talking to a paralegal and a judge regarding this, just making a follow-up, and I made some extra purchases to expand that further. So this is something that in the future I would want to have a platform for this sector, which I don't want to mention for now because it's so obvious if I give a hint. So yeah, that's what I'm interested to look for. I look forward to. But yeah, I'm quite excited with the recent updates from Omnisat with Bunzi. Swaps are easier and there's so much more.
I have to say, from what we'd talked about way back in February, I to this day I don't think I've seen anyone mention anything even close to what you had planned on doing. So the fact that you'd like to still build that and through parent-child, that actually is pretty smart idea. So I wish you the best of that. That's kind of where you would hope the ordinal space moves to, is where it moves past this spot of, speculation and trading, which is always going to exist in anything that's tokenized, no matter if it's a social token, a Bitcoin or a Litecoin ordinal, right? Dogecoin, Pepe, meme coin. There's always going to be some speculatory aspects to it. But moving past that, in the same idea that Vitalik proposes a lot about Ethereum, is that we need some actual, utility or actual functionality. We need some actual use cases that kind of moves beyond just financial exchanges. And it seems like the ordinal space There's beginning to be some perspectives that I've seen online begin to, theorize how to do some of this stuff or what it could mean, what can you do with an ordinal in the absence of smart contracts. Recursion will probably bring that together and make it a lot easier. But in this current state where we are in the early beginnings of recursion, there's a lot of opportunity, but a lot of immature infrastructure that really exists in this ecosystem. So parent-childs are cool, right? On-chain monkeys has really kind of pioneered what you can do with that, at least to the beginning, and everyone's really going to be building up to that. And as we close up out of here, I'm just curious, who do you look at? I wouldn't say look up to in the space, but who would you say is like a good example as a leader in the ordinal space, or somebody that you follow with that's maybe a builder who has presented a lot of accolades and prestige, and that you maybe even hope to partner with at some point in the future?
Yeah, so for me, I always look up to Danny from On-Chain Monkeys because everything comes with experience. Like with the experience that he has, it's just a no-brainer for me not essentially follow his footsteps, but to be continuously inspired to build and help out within the Ordinals ecosystem in a way, you know. And another person would be Frank from D Gods, because I think he knows he knows how to distinguish what are his strengths and weaknesses ultimately. And this is where we can actually see how he execute things differently compared to other project founders in this Web3 ecosystem. And another thing that I want to add is, like even though Ordinals is like for other people, they're calling it dead or a fad. I think what people could reimagine is probably think of ordinals as Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been called dead for 400 times, right? So regardless what happens for ordinals, I think it's going to be around for a long time. So I think they just need to look at it differently, change their lens. That's how I see it.
I remember when I first even got into the space, they had already had this, I think it was a Wikipedia or encyclopedia of Bitcoin obituaries from the amount of times that publications said Bitcoin is dead. And it was in the hundreds of times already back in 2017. So I can't imagine today it's probably in the thousands. Ordinals is going to survive. The Lindy effect of Bitcoin is just astronomical. It's not going anywhere. And there's going to be a thriving NFT and non-fungible asset utility or community, and maybe even tokens with BRC20s. It'll thrive. It just needs to go through its own growth period and maturation. Only 6 months into it, a lot of people and a lot of traders mostly call things dead because they bought the top and don't want to hang around for.
Yeah,
They don't.
I can relate to that. Like last time it was euphoric for everyone during the BRC20 craze, and now all of a sudden people from different chains, they're saying that Ordinals is dead. I think they should keep in mind that it hasn't been a year and we're still in its infancy. Like I see a lot of opportunities being built on Bitcoin Ordinals, and they should just rediscover things, have a different perspective.
Yeah, I agree. There's a pretty large learning curve at first. It is becoming more efficient and more accessible to, we'll say, the average crypto goer. Of course, for grandma and grandpa, they'll probably never figure it out, at least for many more years. But that ability to, access Bitcoin or present it in a way to somebody else on, Ethereum or Solana in some sort of cross-chain manner, or something more relatable to them, like purchasing it in their native currency or the currency of their choice. Those kind of things are the incremental steps that the ordinal community needs to take to ensure that you get mass participation from the entire ecosystem, and not just present itself as this maximalist chain, knowing that the largest opportunity likely exists on Bitcoin just from the pure market cap of being, nearly double what the next chain is. It might be even more than double now at this point from Ethereum. So large opportunities. I think everyone sees that. The absence of smart contracts is what tends to turn a lot of them away, but it hasn't turned you away, Tosyo. So props to you, man. I appreciate you for coming on, sharing this kind of conversation, even doing back-to-back AMA to this. I look forward to, as a whale holder and a friend of yours, to see your progress and journey over the next few years.
Thank you so much, Jake, for having me. And I look forward to share you what we're essentially building in the future as we move forward. with this ecosystem.
Fuck. Whammy, as they would say. Was it whales all make it? Right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, whammy. So, whales always make it, even in the times of uncertainties. Yeah, that's how we got the slogan going.
There we go. Whales always make it. And we'll see you guys next time.